Settle down back there, please. I suppose it's time that we can start, although the more here, the better. Yeah, these guys always were kind of a problem. That's James and Greg. Just pointing out the problem kids in the class. Yeah. Okay, well, welcome you guys, and people are coming in. I'll hang on, I see Charles coming around the corner. I thought I was starting. Well, maybe he's going to stop and talk. Let's have prayer. Lord, this morning we spend time with the lesson, and we just invite you to be part of that, an active part of our thoughts and understandings and growth, hopefully, and just drawn to you even more by looking at some of these things. Thank you for life. We apologize for the mess that humanity is in. We just ask for your blessing and protection over people personal to us and around the world that are in dangerous places. And we just look forward to you being the only one involved in this earth's leadership. We look forward to that time, Lord. Amen. Well, we're obviously in the book of Genesis, and I want to start with a little recap. Now, the first 2 chapters of Genesis, if I say, what comes to your mind of significance in the first 2 chapters of Genesis? And you would say things like creation. I mean, that's the biggie, or a biggie part there. What else can we take out of those 2 chapters? Pardon? Sabbath, that's a biggie. Anything else? Marriage, the establishment of the first family. Wow. What? Did I say here genealogy, the start of the human race? One of the thoughts that, and I may be stretching a little far here, that came to me is from the creation story, the Creator. You know, the beyond us and our imagination, who this being is that can just make stuff by the power of his word. Anything else out of the first 2 chapters you want to grab onto? Equality. Side by side. Yeah. Which was, and if we'd even back up from that, we would say, trust God. And you said perfection. I mean, it's just hard to imagine what this world would be before sin. If we move up to chapter 3, what goes on in chapter 3? How'd you like the segue right there? Chapter 3 was the serpent, sin. Joe? So, yeah. And that's the Sabbath concept, even greater than the Sabbath. Yeah. So chapter 3, is that where I was? The fall. What else do you pull out of that chapter?
The relationship between Adam and Eve had changed, obviously. They're no longer truly equals, now who's ahead.
Yeah.
Man and woman's covering is replaced by covering from God.
And that's weird, isn't it? And I was thinking about The blame game starts in here, doesn't it? Where does it start? In Genesis 3, where does the blame game start? Yep, Eve blames the serpent. The serpent probably blames God for being unfair, doesn't he? Adam, and then, yeah, the woman you made me. Yeah. Anything else out of, before we leave chapter 3, Joe? Yeah, the false. Yeah, and now somebody say Genesis 3:15. The promise of a Messiah, a Redeemer, a restoration, an undoing of what has happened. Last week was Genesis 4, and that was the story of Cain and Abel. What do we pull out of there of note?
Sin got worse.
Sin got worse, and sin got so much worse. How bad a sin, crime, is murder? In our culture, that's, and we even have first, second, third degree. There's another one, manslaughter. What's first degree murder? Pardon? Premeditated. You planned it, you went, you killed. So Cain's murder was what caliber of murder? First degree. Wow. And they're not that far out from creation and in the garden and all of that. Also, the blame game continues, well, sorta. When, maybe I'm not characterizing that quite right. When God asked Cain, where's your brother? We get kind of a smarty retort, don't we? He says, what am I supposed to keep track of my brother? I don't know if that's implying God's supposed to do that. And interesting in all of these, when God asks, like Adam and Eve, where are you? Who told you you were naked? Where's your brother? He knows those. He knows the answers to all of them. He's asking them for the benefit of the askee. Is there such a word? Asker and askee? Anyway, shedding of blood. Well, we don't want to take too long on that. The next chapter in Genesis, chapter 5, the quarterly skips over completely. And that's the genealogy of the, well, before I totally leave chapter 4, even on the first page of the quarterly, at the bottom paragraph, it said something about the lines of Cain and who's the other son of Adam and Eve, the new one? Seth. Implying a good line and a bad line. Now, am I stuck if I'm from a bad line and you're from a good line?
Yep.
There we go. Okay, we're done. Despite that implication, what's the actual truth about all that? Pardon? You can be in the saving relationship, I'll say, regardless of your heritage. And you know, some of us come from kind of rocky paths to get where we are today. And that needn't ever keep you from being with Christ. Now, chapter 4 ends with, who was Adam's other son again? Seth, thank you. A few more times. It ends with saying people began to follow the Lord. Now, that's a mystery to me because they have Adam and Eve to tell them firsthand story of what's happened till now. And so many people didn't follow the Lord, but Seth's line did. And so chapter 5 is Seth's line. I said Seth, didn't I? I'm getting it. And there's 10 of them in there, from Adam to the 10th is today's lesson, Noah. And it's about, I don't know, 1,500 years maybe that those 10 generations take. And what's interesting that, you know how long they lived back then? Take out a 30-year mortgage, you got your house paid in 30 years and you live free for 900 more. Anyway. Well, yeah. And taxes in 1,000 years might be higher. But I was going I know where I was going. Many of these, do I call these guys patriarchs? I know Adam, those guys are, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we call them patriarchs. Are these guys patriarchs? Anyway, so many of these patriarchs were still alive when Noah came to be. And so once again, and many of them, Noah wasn't alive when Adam was still alive. There's about 120, 30-year gap there. But all these other patriarchs, they're still hearing first-person accounts of walking with God in person, etc., etc. What a resource. Noah never had that, but he did have a bunch of people who had heard that in his lifetime. Let's start with page 1. When I was talking about good line, bad line, categorizing people, that is a problem in this world, isn't it? What does categorizing people tend to lead to? Exclusiveness. And that judgmental, discrimination, categorizing. And I'm surprised when I hear statistics about, the increase in assaults on Asians because of the COVID thing. Does that even make sense? By the way, I just read a couple days ago, or heard, it was a intercepted phone conversation with someone out of Russia saying, we know Ukraine started the pandemic. Well, that was new to me. Anyway. Pardon? Yeah, news to a lot of people. Anyway, the categorizing people tends to be harmful rather than accepting people. I've already sort of asked permission, or I should have apologized. I want to describe a category and ask what your input is. And this is someone who did not accept spiritual things in their life, did not live a spiritual life, and committed suicide. What category is that person in? Up to God? Up to God? It's hard for human perception to look at that, even look through it maybe. And I've come up with 3 terms. I only have a name for the first 2. We'll have to figure out the third one. One of the terms is justice without mercy, and one's mercy without justice. Can you think of any examples of either of those 2 out of the Bible? Justice without mercy, mercy without justice. They're in there, so I'm going to wait you out.
Well, Judas, he got justice.
Well,
The woman caught in adultery was mercy without justice.
that Jesus said, go, I don't. Mercy without justice, wow. There are more, keep going. It's unfair because I thought about this earlier. Thief on the cross. mercy without justice. Prodigal son, mercy without justice. The prodigal son's brother. What do we have here? He wanted what the guy deserved. He wanted justice. And here's another one, takes me back to Cain and Adam. When the father comes out in the prodigal son story, trying to invite the other brother to come and join the celebration. And the brother says, this son of yours, the blame game going on healthy and well. Any other examples of justice without mercy or mercy without justice in the Bible?
Justice without mercy Elijah, his servant,
Oh,
who got leprosy.
N-
This is just stuff from Naaman.
so Elijah's servant Naaman, who got leprosy.
Naaman was a Syrian warlord that came to get cured of
What was, I'm trying to say the servant's name, I'm doing it.
But the servant went after Naaman to get the treasures that he offered, and then he got cursed with the leprosy of Naaman.
That seemed kind of just to me.
But no mercy.
Oh, yeah.
We're looking for
Dave.
justice without mercy.
What about Jesus dying on the cross?
You know, and I agree with you, I would have said the same thing, but that wasn't even just. He didn't deserve it. But I understand why he was experiencing somebody's justice, and for that short time there, without God's mercy. Wow. Joe, you had your hand up.
There's another category, and that would be mercy with justice.
Well,
Throughout the Bible, God repeatedly gave some of the heathen nations around Israel, individuals, repeated stories of how God warned, gave them time, gave them chance after chance, but finally justice had to be met.
yeah. Yes.
What's that? I was just going to say that most of these things that we've been talking about, we're talking about the Creator and people. And with Him, there may be deferred justice, but ultimately there's always justice. Everything He does is, in the end, is just. Mercy is just give a second chance, a deferment of the ultimate. I mean, you know, when Eve ate from the tree, he said, you will surely die. And they lived 600 some years later, but it was, death was imminent and ultimate,
Yeah.
at least physical death.
And when I was thinking about this, I thought of Sodom and Gomorrah. That on the surface, and we know there's an eternal element in all of this, conclusive one. But that seems like, do I say justice without mercy, or was it? Joe?
I have a feeling that Lot, probably, and maybe even Abraham, did some preaching in that city. We don't always have everything that happens recorded in the Bible.
Right.
Knowing God's modus operandi, I think He must have given them many opportunities to see where they were wrong, and they just continually got more wicked and more wicked.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were warned. I mean, you know, he said, leave the city or it's going to be demolished. And here again, it's a matter of faith, which is believing. They didn't believe, so they stayed to protect their worldly goods, probably. And
Yeah, he tried to
they
get
suffered the consequences of their bad decisions.
the other family members to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the people that were there with Noah, all the people that drowned,
Okay, and let's come back to them in just a moment. I think it was somebody said the third category, you named it, didn't you? There's justice without mercy, mercy without justice, and some kind of a blend of the two, however we want to say it, because do I want to get what I have coming? Well, I would prefer mercy. Are there people who would say that's not fair? That person deserves whatever?
The concubine at the bench tonight that she didn't get mercy and she didn't get justice. She just got used up and cut up and said all over the map, all over the country.
Yeah. Well, I guess and you might have some other thoughts, but I end up thinking, I'm glad it's up to God, because that's beyond my ability to,
Well, God knows the heart of every person.
yeah,
We only know their actions,
yeah,
and our actions we judge,
yep.
and sometimes we misjudge, but God never misjudges.
Let me get into Genesis, where we seem to be today. Genesis 6, and I guess I'm looking at 5. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and that's a sad line right there. And his heart was deeply troubled. So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race that I have created. We've probably tossed this around, every one of us sometimes, and probably not come up with an answer to it. Does God know ahead of time what's going to happen?
Yeah.
We believe he's all-knowing, that he does. And so is he surprised that he saw the great wickedness, he regretted it, his heart was deeply troubled?
But it's also from a universal perspective, not just the earth perspective.
Yeah.
So there's a bigger audience than us.
Yes. And there are two elements at work that I don't think we begin to grasp the significance or effect of. One is free will, the significance and effect of free will and the role it plays in God's creation. And the other is the power of sin, how it can pollute, contaminate, infect, and look what it's done. In 10 generations, from perfect in Eden to now God's sorry that he made these hurts in his heart.
You know, one of the things we have to realize is this was written in an ancient Hebrew language and translated into Greek and then translated into English. And a lot of the nuances that are in the language kind of get skewed. I know I've listened to some people who have studied ancient languages, and a lot of times it's not that the plan of salvation is lost, but some of the nuances of statements
Yeah.
get and plus the scribes tried to help out a lot of times, and they also made mistakes because everything was hand copied back then, and so sometimes it's not exactly the way it reads in English.
I suspect if I knew all those nuances, I still wouldn't understand some of this. Yet. So we come to the time of the ark, or Noah. He's going to follow God's instruction, and several of these patriarchs were alive for Noah, I think he was 600 when he went into the ark. And Methuselah lived up till the year of the flood, if I remember right. And Lamech lived in there I mean, there were patriarchs, no doubt, were part of the ark project. Speaking of the ark project, have some of you visited the ark thing? You have? Anybody else? I look at pictures of that and videos of that, and it looks impressive. Maybe someday. And you were trying to say something about the people at Noah's time, weren't you? Was that an example of justice without mercy, or I don't remember exactly what you were saying. Yeah. What did it take, Joe?
I think there was mercy because he gave 120 years for Noah and probably some of the other patriarchs to plead with the people to try and get them to recognize that God was doing anything for them to be on the right side.
Yeah, and even before that, surely they shared their belief in God, the other patriarchs and their families. There could be many, and plus, then now the mess destroyed, or not destroyed. He didn't destroy the earth. What did he do? He washed it. He reorganized it, overhauled it.
But even ultimately, that was an act of mercy, because without that, mankind would have destroyed itself long before it was God's intention that the earth be destroyed. So, it was a desperate act, but it was an act that had to be done, or else the outcome would have been worse than it was. And everybody was given an opportunity. I mean, it wasn't like, it's like, I'm killing you no matter what. It's like, here, make a choice. And again, people make the wrong choices based on bad information or on bad interpretation of the information.
Our sinful tendencies, the effect of sin within us, etc. What was the minimum it took to be saved at that time?
Physically get in the ark.
Step into the ark. Isn't that what would have saved someone? I don't think there was a fundamentals belief quiz you had to pass. Well, what do I know? I don't know anything about it. But it seems like they're invited to believe the warning and come with us. And it seems like that's all it took. Walk up the ramp, go through the turnstile, whatever. Pre-raindrops? So why didn't they make that choice?
Mostly fear of being wrong. They didn't want to look stupid in front of their neighbors.
Peer pressure.
They looked dead instead.
Peer pressure. I don't want to look dumb. Well, even today, what's the secular perception of the flood?
Biggest fairy tale in the world.
Fairy tales,
So my
myths,
husband told me,
localized floods.
why would God do that to the humans, or just kill everybody that it won't kill?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Look to the science on that.
Pardon?
Got to look to the science on that.
Yeah, the world today, looking back, public opinion is not in our favor, probably.
I think it all boils down to belief in God, no matter what they chose. It was belief in God.
Yeah.
I didn't want anybody, doesn't want anybody in heaven that doesn't believe in Him.
Yeah. Well, and yes, very much so. And she's saying that you wouldn't expect someone in heaven who didn't believe in God. Now, let me go with Dave, Joe, Chris, is it? And Skippy.
Well, it's interesting to me that, essentially the world, kind of rejects the idea of God instituting a worldwide flood and, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the world today very readily accepts the idea of this global warming, climate change that is the result of mankind's actions. So,
So we can do it, but God can't.
yeah, it's interesting, I think, to think about it.
Actually, when I ask what's the popular opinion about the flood, right on top of that is about creation. You know, the secular, anyway. Joe? Joe's next. I think, was that right or not? I made the mistake of putting my fingers down and now.
Really, basically what Dave said, I think, is kind of what I was going to say. I think they had scientists back then. This is not maybe recorded in the Bible, but I'm sure there were people, eminent people that everybody listened to. Hey, it's never rained. This is ridiculous. This is just a crazy, crazy story that's going on, that there's going to be a flood. So I think it was rejection of science by those that chose to follow Noah and those others who were preaching righteousness.
Chris?
Well, it's just, when I hear people talk about believing in God, I mean, certainly Satan and his angels, or Lucifer and his angels, Satan not being a proper name, they believe in him because they know he exists, but it's believing him, not believing in him. I mean, many of those people that didn't get on the ark may have claimed to be, I mean, certainly they had, you know, as you say, they were generations, had people who were there in the, you know, in the early days of creation, and they may have, just like today, said they believed in the Creator and everything, but they didn't believe him when, or they didn't know his voice when he was telling them, you need to move to safety if you want to be saved.
Yeah.
And we do the same thing today. We claim to believe in him, but we don't necessarily believe in his principles or his teachings.
I think people believe that all things are going to continue as they have been. Wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes and volcanoes and all of this. But back then, the people had never seen rain. So they couldn't even imagine rain, so they didn't believe. But it's the same today when you warn people that Jesus is soon to come. There have been lots of volcanoes and floods before. I don't see that he's coming. So it's just, I don't know. It's just
Yeah. And we're probably answering my next comment. Oh, okay, go ahead.
I see it as oil and water. We have the righteous being the water, and oil.
Oil and water. Hard to mix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I see that Noah didn't have any friends. I mean, anybody that was not a believer, they are not
Yeah.
going to be mixed in together. They're separate.
Well, what do you think allowed Noah to have that level of belief and conviction? Because we're kind of describing what he was facing. Done old things laying around that I'm not interested in anymore. Well, here's, go ahead.
So did God come to you and tell you to work on the car?
No, he should
I
have.
think that'd be different.
It might have helped, I don't know. But how, imagine what commitment it took for Noah to launch on that project, stick with it. He no doubt had a lot of help, you know, from the patriarchal line before that. The cost of it, it's hard for me to picture the size of it.
You know, one thing, it says in verse 13, chapter 6, and God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. I think that made sense to Noah. You know, he could see in his own lifetime the changes and how things were getting worse and worse and worse. And so I think it was logical that, yeah, this is something that is hard to imagine, but God said it, and, you know, I can see
Yeah.
why God's going to do it.
Yeah. There's a verse in, is it Matthew 24? Something about as it was in the Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man.
Our belief is that the world is going to get worse until it all goes to pieces and Christ comes. But there are an awful lot of people that believe that if we just do the right thing, we'll have a utopia one day. We're just the opposite, and we already know, and we just have to look around us, as you just said. What has happened in the past? Where are things going? To say, things are only getting worse.
Yeah.
Yet there are many, many people who believe that no, things are getting better.
I mean, and even on a biological sense,
Yes.
the improvement of the whatever.
I mean, it's just amazing what one evil person can do. I mean, we have this thing in Ukraine which has affected tens of millions of
Yeah.
people, hundreds of millions of people, I guess, when you consider the Russians are being impacted also. And it's just for one man's ego. And I mean, it's just amazing. It doesn't take a lot. And it's happened before, you know,
Yeah.
with the Second World War and the First World War. And
Yeah.
it's just that we have the ability now to expand our wars to cover the whole globe, whereas it used to just be a couple of bands of people shooting bows and arrows at each other.
Yeah. Well, we've certainly seen how fast things can change in this world. Some of you are old enough, all of you are old enough to remember when the Berlin Wall fell, for instance, when Russia dissolved, or however I should say that, the USSR. Yeah. And those changes happened, I mean, you couldn't believe how fast some things in the world changed. The pandemic, look how fast the world changed. And I guess it lets us know that end time events could happen pretty quickly. You look and you think, well, I don't see how that's coming about. I don't see how that's going to happen. That'd take a long time for that would ever come. But it's getting harder to say that. Well,
Ray, have I read, I can't find the verse right now, it might have been in Ellen G. White's writings, where they can actually look at where the Garden of Eden was, and there was a guardian angel keeping people from going in
apparently there was back at the time
at the time.
that a cherubim with a flaming sword, do I have that right,
Yeah.
was posted lest people go in the garden and eat of the
Tree of life.
tree of life and live forever.
Is that a Bible, or is that an Ellen White?
Is it?
That's what I'm like, mentioned in the scripture.
Okay, that's what I thought.
There's no flaming cherub in here?
I think that's mentioned, but not how long they were able to see that.
Oh yeah, I don't know about that part. Okay, so we're in the flood. The animals come aboard. By the way, since God destroyed all these people because they were so evil, and this is a dumb question for me